Let's start looking at some of the past HSC questions and how we would approach them if this was our question. So from the year 2016, just last year, explain how Wilfred Owen's poetry invites us into a different world and broadens our understanding of human experience. I find this to be quite a challenging question because it's broken into so many different parts. In your response, make detailed reference to at least 2 of the poems set for study. My approach to at least 2 is to have 2 in depth, plus 1 for support. So another thing that I've thought of with explain how, our how is always poetic devices. And I've thought of an acronym which is SIT. Let's sit with Owen. With structure, because the structures are so varied. Imagery. And we can look at sound with our alliteration and assonance. And our visual with similes and metaphors. And finally, the T in our sit with Owen, tone. I find this the easiest to write about, which is funny because in most poetry, tone can be quite elusive, but we have those shifts between poems and within poems. So let's sit with Owen with structure, imagery, and tone. So our how is always the crafting of the poem. So explain how. Wilfred Owen's poetry invites us. I really, really love that idea of an invitation. So it's very personal and inclusive. So you can contrast this with, say, Rupert Brooks and his distant, remote, very mannered glorification of war, whereas Wilfred Owen invites us into a different world. And this different world is a world of protest. And broadens our understanding of human experience. So he broadens our understanding through being the voice of the First World War. So we're looking at the years 1914 to 1918. And these are the years in which the concept of a war of technology, a war of mass destruction, and total war was a reality for the first time in history. Prior to this, battles had been contained, war fronts had been contained. So this different world is supposedly the war to end all wars, but it was the start of an entire new century of warfare. So that would be, for me, the context, the setting up of context, because we can't discuss Owen without looking at his place globally. And the broadening of our understanding of human experience, I think that's where it goes back to the invitation. So in futility, we're invited to that intimate moment when one soldier dies and another responds to his death. Invited to an intimate moment of death and reflection. And in Anthem for Doomed Youth, we're invited to the sad shires, to the home front, to the way in which these men are not mourned in the way that other deaths are mourned. So we have that, and it's very rare for Owen to focus on the home front, and this is one of the poems in which he does so very profoundly. And finally, as our backup poem, for me anyway, it would be Dulce. And that embodies the complete experience of trench warfare. In all its horrors and devastations, and it is that definitive judgment on war as essentially destructive, divisive, without glory, without merit, without honour. So I would be using futility as an invitation into the different world of a soldier experiencing grief for another soldier. I would be looking at Anthem as that invitation of a different world in which the impact Doomed Youth, Anthem for Doomed Youth, impacts way beyond a specific battlefront. And I'd be bringing both of those poems together with Dulce in terms of how confronting it is. So in terms of human experience with loss, destruction, grief, devastation, and the list here could just go on, but we have 40 minutes under exam conditions. So in my explanation of how Wilfred Owen's poetry invites us into a different world and broadens our understanding of human experience, I'd be looking at